I'm trying to figure out how this notion of a teacher who will come and bring the new teaching can be interconnected between religions. So there's a teacher in the Islamic world, the Mahdi. There's, of course, Jesus who will come back in Christianity. There is, even in Zoroastrian religion, there will be somebody in the end of times who will bring a new teaching. In Judaism, of course, it's the Messiah. So it's so interesting, and it's so dangerous for anybody, especially someone who likes spirituality and likes to get to know spirituality and yourself, to get the narcissistic trigger point to identify yourself with the idea of being like a teacher who brings a new spiritual teaching and is like the Jesus of the new world and stuff. It's very dangerous. So I think that that knowledge or that notion of a future leader and teacher is bringing us is inspiration to be this leader ourselves, so we can be this teacher. It's not one single person who will be the new Buddha, who will be the Maitreya. Maitreya is the 29th Buddha who will come and save us all someday when the people will be be ready for that. So Maitreya is also like a Messiah, like the new Buddha, like Jesus, like Mahdi. And it's very interesting because Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, of course Hinduism also with Kalki, also a teacher who will bring us the end of suffering and stuff. It's like an inspiration to be the Kalki or the Mahdi or the Messiah or the Jesus ourselves without projecting that energy or that emotion or the necessity for a teacher to other people. So we can all be our own Buddha. That's what I'm trying to say. We can all be our own Messiah. We can all be our own Mahdi. You know what I'm saying? We can all be our own teacher and leader and stuff. That's what I'm trying to get at. And of course, it's something that scares me, because if you have that idea of yourself, that you have even the potential to be this kind of person who tries to help others, who tries to bring knowledge, who tries to actually help people get to know spirituality and get to help people push themselves to read Erich Fromm, to read Eckhart Tolle, to read Osho, If you're that kind of person, then you kind of are already a Buddha in a smaller sense, because of course you bring humanity forward by bringing the awakening forward. So awakening, I mean, the basically what I mean with awakening is bringing your unconscious to your consciousness, or bringing your unconscious to your conscious, bringing your unconscious to your conscious, like Freud did, kind of, whatever. So Yeah, so um, that's what I was trying to do the last 20 years. Yes, so let's start by trying to figure out which directions of psychology, philosophy, spirituality, and religion can help me or us or whatever in finding that common ground. Finding that common ground in Judaism. Finding that common ground in mystical Judaism. Okay, so in the Kabbalah. Of course, the Kabbalah is based on the Torah and stuff, so you can't just disconnect it, but I'm trying to say, Judaism should be our common ground, especially as Germans or as new Germans, because the old Germans, they try to push their guilt away so they don't feel it anymore, but they're pushing their guilt onto other people who are already suffering. So, killing some people in Gaza may be okay for an Israeli, but a German guy who laughs at the Palestinian child being hungry is like, it's just Nazi shit. So, yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at, yes. So let's look at some teachings I think are very interesting and important. Yes. So I will um I will speak German now, but I will in the video description make a translation in English. Yes, so psychodynamische Therapien, psychodynamic therapies. So fuck it, I will just say it in German and English. I don't have to put it in the video description. So okay, psychodynamic therapies. Basically, that's trying to bring unconscious conflicts into the light of our psyche. And of course, the father of psychodynamic therapies was Sigmund Freud. Yes. And this is very important because Freud was the first one to actually recognize, or the first Western guy to recognize the unconscious in the human psyche. Or not the first one, because Freud also had a teacher who also already had some stuff about the unconscious written, but he was like the first real psychologist and stuff who was not a philosopher, but more like a scientist. Secondly, kognitive Verhaltenstherapie. Cognitive Verhalten. Well, it's just cognitive therapy about your own behavior. Behavior therapy. I think it's behavior therapy. Um, it's about the interconnection between emotions, your actions, and your thoughts, and your Grundannahmen. So the things that you believe about the world and yourself and other people without, questioning if it's just your if it's just your social background that drives you thinking like that, or if it's your own analysis that lets you think that some person is this or that, or some person is this or that. Yes, so the next one is the Stoa. Stoa is a Greek philosophy. It's basically talking about being disciplined enough to be gelassen, to to not worry about what you. It's like a 50 Cent quote. It's about trying not to worry about the stuff you cannot change and worrying about the stuff you can change. That's basically Stoicism. Of course, Marcus Aurelius, our father of Stoicism, who was not really our father, who was a Roman guy, who got the ideas from older Greek guys, but you know, he was very, he was very, he was very influential. A Roman chancellor, very interesting. Yes, it's basically about discipline and trying to reflect on your own behavior, on your own thoughts, you know, on your own being. Then we have the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is something I find most interesting about Judaism, about Jewish mysticism, because the Kabbalah is just it's just the like the essence of spirituality. So the Kabbalah is the highest, for me, the most interesting and most highest form of religious spirituality. You know, you can front me, you can say you can say whatever, but I think it's great. So the next thing is Sufism. Sufism is the mystic branch of Islam. And what Sufism is trying to do is basically come nearer to God, or to know God in our own experience. So not trying to project a God into the heaven, you know, a father in heaven who is watching all of us, but it's more like they're searching for God in our own now, in our own life, you know, in our own day-to-day experience. They're trying to come nearer to God, you know, or to experience God, you know. And that's basically by trying to experience that that we are not isolated, that the being, that God is basically our own being, you know. So God is not some absurd abstract thing in Sufism, but God is like an essence that interconnects us all and everything. So not just humans, but animals and trees and plants and things. So yeah. Next, of course, is what I don't want to say of course, but of course it's something that is very, very influential in the spiritual world, especially in the modern spiritual era. Buddhism. Buddhism, basically, you know, there's meditation, there's the philosophy of Buddhism, there's the religious aspect of Buddhism. I think everybody knows what Buddhism is, what the Buddha is, who the Buddha was. You know, the Buddha was a prince and he was very rich, and after he saw the suffering of his own people, he wanted to live like a monk and try to find an ending to the suffering of the people, and to try the end of suffering for his own self and for other people. and that's what he did. I think Buddhism is like, it's very, 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 very interesting and very essential for every person who is trying to get to know spirituality. But it's also very colonized, and it's very like, yeah, it got instrumentalized by a lot of people, not just Europeans, also Chinese people, also Japanese people. Everybody took something for themselves from Buddhism. Of course, um, the source was in northern India. Yes. So then the Hindu philosophy and the Vedic scriptures. The Vedic scriptures are like the philosophical ground of religious Hinduism. So I think Hinduism, of course, Hinduism is far older than Buddhism, and it's like everybody in almost everybody, like 80%, I think, in India is Hindu. So, or at least 60% or stuff like that. Of course, it's just like a Hindu country, but there are also Muslims and Buddhists and Sikhs and stuff. So yes, sorry. If I can't get the numbers right, I'm sorry. Then we have phenomenology. Phenomenology is basically trying to figure out how our subjective minds are projecting our own thoughts and fears into other people and the world without getting nearer to the actual reality. So phenomenology tries to figure out, okay, there's reality, there's us, and there's our perception of reality. And how do we get from our perception of reality to a more clearer perception of reality without, losing our subjective minds or losing our subjective interpretation. It's more like getting to know our own interpretation of the world, so we can see what is reality and what is our interpretation of reality. So it's very, very important. Phenomenology is very important. I think it's actually, I think it's the most, or one of the most important philosophies of the 20th century. Then we have existentialism. Existentialism basically means that every person is responsible for themselves to find a meaning in life. There's no objective meaning in life, but you have to search your own meaning in life by giving your life a meaning, and get and understanding that there is no objective meaning. So yes, that's existentialism. Then we have the Gnostics. Basically, it's basically like spiritual knowledge influenced by Christianity. So it's like a funny little branch of Christianity, but with, of course, own knowledge as well. Then we have yoga. Of course, yoga is like body, mind, and soul and stuff. Like your whole structure of body, soul, mind, intellect, energy, and stuff. It can be a little bit esoteric, but it's also spiritual. And also, I want to say in this at this point, I don't like esoteric stuff, and I try to find nice things about esoteric things to integrate it into my spiritual stuff. But it's not like I like esoteric stuff at all. I am really just interested in spiritual stuff. So yeah. Then we have post-structuralism, post-structuralism. That means that our truth, our subjective truths and identities, our concepts of ourselves are influenced by our society. That's basically what it's saying. And it's trying to figure out how the society actually influenced our own self-concept. So that's very, very, very important. That's very important. Then we have constructivism. Constructivism basically means that we construct our own knowledge and we construct our own reality, and there's not one objective reality. So it really harmonizes with phenomenology and existentialism, because it's basically about creating your own reality. Constructivism is being about creating your own reality. Then we have Machiavellismus. Of course, Machiavelli, everybody knows Machiavelli from Tupac, I'd hope. He was an Italian politician and writer who wrote books about the power structures in Italy in the Middle Ages, and he was very into the political stuff, into power plays, into how you can stab your enemy in the back and stuff like that, so very practical. Then we have Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism is the old religion of Iran. The old religion of Iran before the Muslims came, the Arabs. And yes, there was basically, before the Arabs came and gave us Islam, there was Zoroastrianism, there was Zarathustra. Of course, there's still Zoroastrians today, but of course, basically just Muslims in Iran. So yeah, but it was the one world religion at one point, And the Baha'is are seeing Zarathustra, so the prophet of the Zoroastrians, as one of their own prophets. And Nietzsche wrote a lot about Zarathustra without too much historical knowledge or interest in Zoroastrianism or Zarathustra, but he made it his own, and Nietzsche was like building a concept of a world leader, of a spiritual teacher, based on the idea of Zarathustra. Okay, so Zarathustra was like a blank page for Nietzsche to find his own form of leadership religious leadership and stuff. Then we have Baha'i. That's what I was talking about. I think the most interesting, or the most like crazy, for my opinion, crazy new religion, because it interconnects all religions. So it interconnects Islam with Judaism, with Christianity, with Buddhism, with Hinduism. They try to find a common ground in all religions. Basically, what I'm trying to do. So Baha'i is like also Iranian religion, and it's very interesting. It's very interesting because for a religion that was founded in the 19th century. In the 19th century, there are so many Baha'is, like millions of them, in the world, and it's steadily growing. The community is steadily growing, so it's something that is very that has a lot of potential to be like the new world order stuff, so very interesting. Next is alchemy. And what I find interesting about alchemy is that alchemy, of course, is the science or the pseudoscience of trying to melt one metal into the next. So they try to make gold out of tin, or they try to make gold out of silver, and silver out of bronze and stuff. And they try to find their own potions and their own stones. The stone of the philosopher's stone, of course, which would grant universal wisdom. Newton, the mathematician and scientist, was an alchemist. He tried to find the stone of philosophy, the philosopher's stone and stuff. So he was not only a physician or a physicist, he was also an alchemist. But alchemy has two sides. One side I just talked about, and the other part of alchemy is basically inner alchemy. So trying to make your own, or trying to canalize your own emotions, trying to make one emotion into the next, just like making one metal into the next. The other side of alchemy is making one emotion into the next. Not turning silver to gold, but turning hatred into energy, into aggressiveness, and turning aggressiveness into activeness, and turning activeness into love, or turning fear into cautiousness. So the alchemy is basically the managing of our emotions. Okay, it's about managing our own emotions. Okay. The next one is Freud. Freud was like, if you ask my master Osho, who is dead, who I'm calling master because he is like my master, but of course he's not really my master, because I didn't really live 60 years ago. But Osho said that Freud, Jung, and Sri Aurobindo were the three most influential and important people in the 20th century. Okay, so these three people, these three psychologists, Freud, Jung, and Sri Aurobindo, are the three people who revolutionized psychology. Okay, so very important. Of course, Freud, I talked about psychodynamic therapies at the beginning. He's the father of that, you know. Then we have Jung. Jung was a scholar of Freud, but he distanced himself from Freud, which was very tragic actually, because Freud was a Jew or partly Jew, and Jung was like pretty much a Nazi, not really a Nazi, but you know, he talked about the Germanic soul of the collective people, and he didn't defend Freud when the Nazis came into Freud's apartment to arrest him. I think Freud got to escape, but you know, Jung was like a sympathizer for the Nazis, but that doesn't change the fact that he unlocked the knowledge about the collective unconscious. So also very, very important figure. And of course, he also talked a lot about he also talked about a lot about alchemy, but he talked a lot about trying to find concepts and trying to find blueprints for self concepts in like stories and folklore. So he tried to analyze folklore and tried to find psychological and spiritual knowledge in like the Nibelung. So the German it's a German book, or so, you know, the Nibelung, we read it in school. It's like very old German book about heroes and dragons and stuff. Not really dragons, I think, but you know, it's something Lord of the Rings stuff. And he tried to find some psychological knowledge in these types of stories. Then we had Alfred Adler. Adler was trying to figure out how our individualism and our social self is interconnected. So he tried to find he tried to find like our own self development, but always in a social context. And he kind of improved Freud's and Jung's theories and psychoanalysis. Then we have Nietzsche, very interesting philosopher who talked a lot about power, who talked a lot about about nihilism, basically. So he was like a nihilist who thought that there's no higher function in the religions, and he said God is dead. But at the same time, he was very concerned about the self-development, how we can improve ourselves how we can actually, be better versions of ourselves. And yeah, that's why Nietzsche is one of the best and most interesting philosophers, because he was like, fuck religions, fuck God, but I take what is interesting from the religions, and I make my own philosophy. But of course, God is dead, if you ask Nietzsche. Then we have Taoism. Taoism is basically the old Chinese religion from Lao Tzu. So the old Chinese traditional religion. Of course, the Book of Tao, I have it as an audiobook, is very, very interesting. Sometimes very abstract, but it's like, if you take your time to actually listen to the words or read the words carefully, truly, then you get the sense of the essence of what they're trying to say, and it's very, very wise. So it's very, very wise. So yeah. Next is humanistic psychology. Basically, just a branch of psychology trying to concentrate on personal development. So just a very interesting branch of psychology. Then we have metacognition.